Hello my friends, time for another hardware review. Today it's with this guy here. The name of it, I have it written down. Arcade 2 TV-XR. That's the name. And it's a massive controller interface, and when they offered this to me, the reason I wanted to try this out and play on it was I was hoping this would really enhance the experiences of playing on a VR arcade. Years ago, I talked about New Retro Arcade Neon. It's now abandonware, and I don't think you should necessarily buy that today. But I've played that for a long time. I've really enjoyed it. And one thing that's always lacked is that I have enjoyed the atmosphere, but actually playing on the arcade cabinets with just motion controllers just doesn't feel great. And I've tried with a gamepad, but that doesn't feel right either. There are other arcade experiences out now that I'll get to in a minute, but that was my initial motivation, was that classic game that I return to every now and again, and I wanted to play it on something like this. And for full disclosure, in exchange for this video, I get to keep all the hardware. So that's the deal with this. You can basically think of this thing like a giant gamepad that you can plug into just about anything. But the benefit is that it provides the tactile feel and arrangement of a real arcade cabinet. It's really well built, and it just feels like a very professional machine. You do assemble it yourself. It took me a few hours of assembly to get this thing together. Now, there's a myriad of ways that you can play on this and connect it to devices. I tested it in 3 modes. I paired it directly with the Quest 3S. I played it on a console, and I played it on PC, both in VR and flat screen. So I'm going to start with how this played on my Quest 3S, because X-Arcade, the company behind this, are making a big push for how this plays in VR. And when you buy this, it comes with a Bluetooth dongle that you plug into your Quest 3 or 3S, and this enables your Quest to pair with this. And if you're using the Quest, this is really meant to be played with their VR gaming platform, which is Arcade Ranger. It's really interesting because in Arcade Ranger, there's VR and mixed reality. And in both those, you have custom arcade arenas or custom arcade rooms that you can build and customize. There are various decorations and various arcade experiences that you build, customize, and play on. And when you customize an arcade cabinet in your virtual space, you have the option to sync it with this. And the way that it aligns positionally with the unit is you put your controllers in the holes on the top and push the player 1 and player 2 buttons at the same time, and that's how it knows where the arcade unit is in your actual physical space. When I calibrated it, the arcade units I placed were just very slightly off from the unit. I think because I had controller straps on the controllers that sort of gave it a different shape and it didn't quite settle in the holes in the top. It was close enough. It was like maybe an inch or half inch off, so it wasn't the deal breaker, but it, just so you know, in my case, it wasn't perfectly aligned with the unit, but it was good enough that I still felt like I was approaching the unit physically and playing on it. In the arcades themselves, you need to load your own ROMs. They have a guide for that, and it's fairly straightforward. But once you do that, you can play the ROMs that you have on a virtual arcade cabinet. And this was really interesting, especially in the mixed reality mode. In mixed reality as a whole, I'm not entirely sure if I'm sold on it yet, but playing this in mixed reality got me closer to being a believer, because having the virtual arcade machine in my real room and having that connection of the physical touch and the virtual in a mixed reality setting was pretty rad. It was pretty cool. And their whole software setup, this whole Arcade Ranger, is really well put together, and I can tell that they're really trying to put their best foot forward in this space, trying to give you a virtual arcade cabinet that feels real with this. Now, one hardware limitation that you should know is that when it comes to the Bluetooth dongle, there is a pass-through, so you can still power your Quest with this plugged in. But I have a splitter that goes from USB-C to an audio jack and a battery. And I wasn't able to plug that in and get audio at the same time. I was able to plug in the splitter and get power, but plugging in the splitter did not allow me to have audio and battery at the same time. So that was one gotcha I experienced. That's one thing you should probably know about. The second way I tested this was on a console. Unfortunately, my PS5 recently died, but thankfully I still have an Xbox 360 kicking, and it still plays games. To play this with consoles, you will need to purchase an additional adapter kit, so that's an additional purchase. There is a significant amount of spaghetti in this adapter. You go USB-A into this guy from the unit, and then it goes into this middle guy, and then to these guys. And these USBs plug into the Xbox 360. So quite a bit of spaghetti here, but once those are plugged in and they stop blinking, it controls just like gamepads. On the unit, the left side is player 1, the right side is player 2, and it controlled the menu. I was able to play games. This is a great segue into changing joystick modes. Now, whether you're playing in console or PC mode, you have the ability to change the joystick from analog to digital and back again. If you're playing on console, it's through a combo of 2 keys that's detailed in the menu. If you're playing on PC, it's through the touchpad. Either way, you will likely have to switch between digital and analog joystick modes, and I had to do that to play properly. Because I think I started out in digital mode and it wasn't responding as fast as I normally thought it would. But then when I switched to analog, it played normally in the game. So it's nice that they provide that feature, because if you weren't able to change those modes, you would certainly have trouble playing games on the console. Now, finally, playing this on PC is good, but there's a lot of gotchas when it comes to playing this on PC. You plug this into your PC via the provided USB cable, and there are 3 modes in which this can play. There's keyboard mode, there's D input mode, and X input mode. You change modes by doing a key combination on the face of the unit, and then it's a hardware reset. So you can't do it via the software that you download, you do it at the unit itself. The software would tell you what mode you're in and whether or not you can customize in that mode. For example, if you're in keyboard mode, in the software interface, it gives you a really clear layout for customizing which buttons you want to emulate for keyboard presses. If you're in D input mode, you can also remap the buttons how you want there. And in X input, you can't reconfigure buttons at all. And that's where I start to get to the gotchas of this. One is that you can save as a preset what you've done, but there's no save slots, basically. There's only one save available to you. So if you're trying to save 5 different save profiles for 5 different games, you're just out of luck because there's only one save option. Another gotcha, which actually, it came from a benefit of the unit, but it became a gotcha on PC. And that is, there's side flippers. So if you want to play pinball games, there's the potential to use the side buttons as side flippers, just like a real pinball machine. But here's the big gotcha with that. By default, this thing is configured such that the left side is exclusively player 1 and the right side is exclusively player 2. So even though you would think using the flippers on the sides would all be just one player playing pinball, the left flipper button is player 1 back or select. The right flipper button is player 2 back or select. Your pinball game won't see these flippers as trigger or bumper buttons like you would expect. It's going to think you're pressing a button on player 1 and then pressing a button on player 2. And if you try to remap that, say in direct mode, the remapping software tells you you can't put a player 2 button in player 1. And in X input, you can't reconfigure buttons at all. And so the only great option right now, if you want to play a pinball game on PC, is to play a pinball game that has full keyboard support. That way you have all the customization in the software to make the player 2 flipper button be whatever button you want for player 1. And for at least PC VR, I was only able to get it successfully working with Pinball FX2 VR and Pinball Inside. Pinball Inside, by the way, is a free game, which is pretty rad. But I tried other VR pinball games, and the others just didn't have full keyboard support, so I wasn't able to get the side flipper buttons to be exclusive to player 1's buttons. I also had to do one little Steam rebinding thing because by default, the Steam overlay thinks the left flipper button is the back button on a controller. And so holding that down would constantly bring up the Steam overlay. But you can undo that, and I'll link down below to the forum posting that showed me how to do that in case you need to do that too. So that's probably the biggest gotcha I'm offering you right now, which is that if you're looking at this and you're thinking, okay, now I want to play VR pinball, you ultimately can in some games. It is possible, but it's not like you would think because of the way it arranges player 1 and player 2. So knowing that pinball game gotcha, overall, in general, I'm really happy with the unit because for me, I'm using it mostly for, like I said, new retro arcade neon, but also for arcade time capsule VR. And this PC VR experience is free to download. I'll link down below to the developers Discord where you can get this and get help on how to set it up and install it. But this really, for most people, supersedes new retro arcade neon. One tiny downside is that you have to move with motion controllers in this experience, but after you're done moving and choosing your arcade, then you can have full control of the arcade with this using X input by default. And playing arcade cabinets on this in VR is really a lot of fun. The unit feels very strong and it's tough. If you tried to break it, you could, of course, but it just feels really nice and solid. The unit is $500, which isn't cheap. For a controller, it's a lot of money, but it feels pro. And like I mentioned before, this connects to many, many other things, including like Steam Deck and Raspberry Pi and other ways that I'm not able to test myself. And there's a million other videos on YouTube about this, on that connectivity and technical stuff. So do fish around more and research more if you're into this. But so far, in the ways that I played on it, I'm pretty pleased. And even though I had those gotchas I mentioned, I'm happy with it. And I like playing on it. Thank you so much for joining me, and hopefully more to come. See ya. Bye. Well, that's it for now. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you see, please subscribe. See ya.